Salam everybody and welcome back to the Majlis podcast where we talk about all things Afghan. I'm your host Mansoor and as always with me is Nouri. Today I'm honored to have Hawa Sultani on the show. Hawa is a true multi-talented leader who has made an impact across various industries. She currently serves as the Cloud and AI Global Lead at Microsoft, where she spearheads transformative strategies and customer success. Hawa's journey is truly remarkable, starting with a neuroscience degree from UC Davis and a role as a clinical director in healthcare. She made a bold career shift in 2016 to scale a family-owned hospitality company, which earned her recognition from Yahoo Finance. After completing a STEM MBA, Hawa became deeply involved in the startup and venture capital ecosystem, where she continues to make a mark as an advisor and investor. She is also passionate about empowering women and underrepresented founders, advising for the city of Sacramento, and teaching financial literacy to Afghan refugees, reconnecting her with her heritage. Hawa's story is one of adaptability, leadership, and giving back to the community, and I'm excited to dive into her journey and insights today. Welcome to the Majlis podcast.
Thank you guys so much for having me here. First of all, as an Afghan, I'm proud, honestly, of both of you for even starting this initiative and having this podcast. I've watched a couple TikTok clips here and there, so it's honestly a pleasure to be here today with you guys.
Well, lucky to have you.
Just to start us off, something common that you and Nouri both had recently was you guys both came back from Italy.
Yes.
So
different parts of Italy.
Oh, different parts?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Tell me about what parts you guys were in, and tell me about your favorite thing and your least favorite thing.
Okay, so I was more towards Milan and like the Dolomites, so like the mountain, the lakes. And I think, Nouri, you were more by the coast, right?
Yeah, I was like southwest Italy, like Naples and Amalfi Coast.
It's a beautiful space.
I heard it's like two different worlds, like North and South Italy, right?
Completely different. Yeah.
You've been to both, right?
I've been to both. I personally, the coast is beautiful. As you know, us, we live in California. We naturally are going to like the coast, the water, and the land, right? But personally, I love the northern region. I just think people are nicer.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if that's like maybe just from my own personal experience, but I've really enjoyed going to the northern region. I think you get a mix of a little bit of everything, right? Like water, mountains. I'm a big nature person, so I just naturally enjoyed the landscape there.
And least favorite thing?
Ooh, my least favorite thing. Okay, so this I feel like is not going to rub people the right way, but I did not like the food. You see? Yeah. See, people are going to think like, yo, wow, it's Italy, it's pizza, pasta.
Yeah.
And it's not that the food's not good. The food's delicious. But I think the choices are limited. So after being there for 5 days or 4 days, it starts to get old. You know what I mean? How much khamir and panetti?
Yeah. And tomato, that's it.
It's all like tomatoes, pasta, pizza, cheese. So it got old real quick.
We're so lucky here in California. Like we have everything, you know.
You get variety here.
I want to tag onto that because my favorite thing was gonna be the food.
Really?
But I will say I do agree with you. I think I was there for like 6-7 days. After the third day, like again, your options are so limited.
Yeah.
I found
it gets old.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I found this like it was called Capital Food. That was the name. I won't forget it because it was owned by these Pakistanis and they had the biggest menu I've ever seen in a restaurant. They had American food, Pakistani food. They didn't have Afghan food, but they had Asian food. And once we found it, we went to that spot like 3 days straight because it was the only place that I found that had
like variety.
Variety, yeah.
But was it good?
It was average.
That out of desperation? You're like, it's not good, but I'm still gonna go.
When you're hungry, everything tastes good.
Exactly. I'll just say this: I ordered a hamburger, and it was definitely like not the best burger I had, but I was just glad to eat something different.
Yeah. I feel you on that. I was gonna say, well, what did you like then?
You
said the food, but like, or maybe what did you not like?
What I didn't like in general when I went to Italy was it was at times it felt very congested. Like every time I'd get in like a Uber, well, they didn't have like Uber there, but like anytime I get in a taxi, it was like edge to edge with cars, and it was like these narrow streets. So that was the only thing, but like overall, like even that like wasn't a big problem. There
Yeah.
wasn't much that I didn't like.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So overall, I mean, I liked almost everything about it. Maybe the food was a
Yeah.
good thing and a bad thing. The
I agree
food
with you
was
on that.
amazing though.
It is. And I also feel like because he went to the coast, it's very touristy.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised, you know, if it's packed, especially during time.
Oh,
we
yeah.
went.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
the end of the like busy season right
Yeah,
now too, right?
end of the busy
yeah.
season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, actually, I'm gonna change that. The thing that I liked a lot about Italy, and it was like this not just in Italy, I'm sure it's probably like this all around Europe, was that everybody was outside. Like the locals,
Mm.
everybody
Mhm.
was outside.
Yeah.
You'd go like to a shop, and there'd be like just people drinking coffee
Yeah.
outside, just talking. And it's just different because in America, I feel like everyone's at home.
Or even when we're out, we're on our phones.
Yeah.
You know, the culture in America is very different. I mean, not to segue from our conversation
yeah,
what
yeah.
we need to talk about today, but that's such a great observation because when you go to Europe, and maybe clearly it's not just from my own experience, you've
Yeah.
noticed it too, there is this sense of life matters more than work, greed, money, big houses, big cars, right? Like it's a very simple lifestyle. And when you go there, you almost get a little bit surprised in a good way,
Mhm.
right? And you're
Yes.
like, wow, there's families together. You see them with their grandparents. They're all eating together. It's late at night, 11 p.m. They're still eating dinner, enjoying
Yeah.
their
Yes.
time. They value life and spending time with one another. And I think sometimes in the world that we live in here, it's go, go, go. You kind of miss that component a little bit.
There's no break. Me and my sister were talking about it today. We were like, you know, Americans here, like we need vacation for a break.
Yeah.
A vacation is not even to like vacation. It's just to stop
To
for
stop.
a second.
Yeah.
'Cause
Correct.
we don't have any time off. Like
Yeah.
even your weekends is like, oh, you have to run errands. You
Yeah.
still have to like maybe your day off's the only day you can go to your
Yeah.
do your like checkup, get your teeth checked, go get your blood test, or you know you have to go buy groceries like
That-
which takes forever. You
so
know,
true, yeah.
prep for the week's meals. Like it's just crazy. But you know, like the observation you made about people being out, like I feel like that's pretty much similar across the world. It's just here it's not like that.
It's
like
not.
it's
Yeah.
shocking to us.
Yeah.
When you go there, so when I went to Milan, which I was recently, they had gosh, I don't know the term, so I don't want to butcher it, but I believe it's like a mid-afternoon time period.
Mm.
The shops all close. Like it's like 2 to 4, 2 to 3. It's like it's very random. It's in the middle of the afternoon. To shop, like everything closes, and you're like, where is everyone? And that's their break time. Like they go, they run their errands during that time. They take a nap, they rest, they like catch up or like grab some food.
And it makes sense because they're out so late.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
like Barcelona, like people were up till like late, like 3 a.m., 4 a.m. out on the streets.
Yes.
I mean, you're gonna need a nap, you
Yeah.
know, in that case.
To rest.
I think my like when it came to Italy, like I think what I liked the most was like the architecture because it's a modern place, but it still has very old buildings, and they've like renovated it
Yeah.
and made it nice, which is nice, you know.
Yeah.
And I think the least favorite thing, and this is gonna come off wrong too, because like I appreciate people that hold on to their culture.
Yeah.
But like as a tourist, I guess my least favorite was like nobody understood English that well, like as
yeah.
much as other
Yeah.
places, or they didn't want to speak it. So it wasn't convenient, but I appreciate that, you know, they hold on
Their
to the
6 roots,
language and
yeah.
stuff. But yeah, it would have been nice if they were more. Was it like that for you? Were you having? a
Oh
little
my
bit trouble?
God, I had a terrible first day in Italy because no one spoke English, and they speak so fast. I couldn't keep up. I had like Google Translate, and the guy would respond to me, and I didn't have enough time to even process what he was saying. So it took me like an hour just to find my hotel. So I felt that pain because I came from Barcelona and everyone spoke English there, and I got
Yeah.
spoiled because then when I came to Italy, no English,
Yeah.
no English.
And where did you fly into though?
I flew into Naples.
That's why. Yeah, I had a feeling because if you go to Rome, they're a bit more. It's tourists, so
Yeah.
they thrive off of that as their
Mm.
economy. So they have to kind of learn
Makes
English.
sense.
Yeah.
But that I've heard they only speak Italian, and so I'm sure it was difficult.
And I got scammed at the airport for because of it. I was looking for a taxi driver, and I found one, or they found me.
Oh yeah.
Because they are quick to
spot
find.
you.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
guy found me. We made eye contact, and I'm telling you, he bulleted towards me. And I asked him, I was like, "How much?" And he kept saying it in Italian. I didn't understand him, and I kept asking him. I put it in Google Translate. He kept responding. At that point, we had like huge luggage. I was like, whatever, let's go. And then
You thought it'd be reasonable.
I thought it'd be reasonable. I was like, it's Italy. I was like, it can't be that expensive. It's not even a touristy city. At the end, when he dropped me off, mind you, it was like a 8-minute ride. He was like 30 euros. I was like, oh, now you speak English.
Oh.
Wow.
And then I had no choice, but I just
Yeah,
paid
you paid
it.
the
I
30
was
euros.
like, whatever. And he dropped me off in the middle of the road.
Wow.
Yeah, I wasn't ready. That first day in Italy was definitely like a wake-up call.
And I don't think do they have the Ubers that work in Naples? Because it works in like their major cities. If you go to like Milan or Rome, I believe,
Yeah.
you can take the ride-sharing apps.
I used Uber in Naples. They didn't have it in the Amalfi Coast, but
Yeah, you're right. They don't.
the Ubers
Yeah.
in Naples was like third party. It was like through Uber, but it was a third party company. So like the person that picked me up wasn't using an Uber app; they were using another app. But I was still getting my ride from the Uber app, if that makes sense.
I see.
I don't know how it
Interesting.
worked, but it was
Yeah.
better than the fixed rates that I was like at the airport.
Well, you made it back.
Yeah.
You're 30 euros short, but you made it back.
Exactly. Sometimes you have to learn the hard way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of big shifts, he had one from Barcelona to Naples. I want to segue a little bit into like your career shift.
Yeah.
Because you started, you were pre-med, right?
I was.
Neuroscience.
Yeah.
And right now I'm talking to someone who's very well versed in the corporate world,
Yeah.
venture capital,
And tech.
technology.
Yeah.
So give me a little give me and the audience, all of us, like a little rundown on like kind of the journey, where you started.
Yeah.
How you shifted.
Let's go all the way back. Let's go
All right.
Let's go back to the younger days. I grew up in New York.
Okay.
Very, very humble beginnings. My parents were obviously immigrants from Afghanistan. They're they're from Kabul. And my dad had come to America, I want to say like the 80s. And he came here and he was sponsored. He actually went straight to Louisiana. And then
Wow.
when he got married, my mom came. And then I kind of grew up in New York. I feel like most people that have that typical journey, you have humble beginnings, right? Like things are not always easy. There's language barriers. There is lack of knowledge on how to approach things, what to do. Sometimes you get scammed into things, right? Like it's a very common sort of process that we all experience. I kind of grew up around environments where family members didn't have like access to healthcare, or living in a large city, there wasn't adequate or great healthcare, right? Or like great doctors that could catch diabetes early on, or hypertension, which is common, diseases or chronic illnesses that are in our communities. So I kind of was exposed to that. And as always, I was a child translator, so I'm sure some of you might have experienced that. As a kid, I would go in the doctor's offices and, you'd translate, or you'd read a letter and try to figure out things. So I was exposed to the world of medicine very early on. Fast forward, I ended up going to middle school, moved to California, moved to Sacramento. Now imagine moving from the city to Sacramento.
That's a big change.
Culture shock.
That's
It was a
huge
complete
change.
culture shock, right? And I was like, where in the world did they bring me? And it's like, love Sacramento now, but at the time I'm like, this is farm town, right? Because
Yeah.
back in the day, there wasn't really what it is today. The population wasn't that big. But my aunt, she was a nurse, and so she worked at a clinic that was operated by an Afghan doctor in our community and also an Iranian doctor. And so she would take me and volunteer there.
Oh, wow.
And I got to see all of the khalas and the bibis and the kakas that would come in. And I felt so connected because I kind of saw my own family members when I was younger. And so I was like, this is like the best thing. And then, you know, they would look at you and they're like, oh, one day you're going to be my doctor, right? And I just worked at the front desk. Like I used to file folders and clean the rooms and whatnot. But I really enjoyed going on a Saturday with my aunt to the clinic. Long story short, that kind of at that age, I was like, this is it. Like, I'm going to be a doctor, right? And I kind of stamped it. And I was like, at the age of 12, I'm like, I figured out my life. Like, this is going to be simple. Graduated, went to high school, went to UC Davis. And then I'm like, all right, like, this is it. My pre-med moment, I'm going to shine.
Like one of the best schools for pre-med.
Yeah, great schools.
Yeah.
You know, I went straight out of high school. Like I remember I had gone a full ride scholarship. I had so many like awards, and I just worked really, really hard in high school because coming from humble beginnings, my mom and my dad would always tell me education is like the key to freedom. You know, like the more educated you are, the more sound decisions you make, and the more opportunities open up. So I always, both myself and my sibling, like we always just worked really, really hard in school. And then I ended up in Davis. And when I was in Davis, I was very curious about the brain and psychology and neuroscience. So I ended up picking that as my degree, and I ended up kind of taking that path. And when I was my 4 years at Davis, I was everything and anything under the sun of pre-med. I was involved, whether it was working at free clinics, doing research, presenting at major conferences, getting published in science journals. I've been working as a clinical director at the UC Davis Hospital, one of the major, academic hospitals in the state of California. And so I just was involved from a research standpoint, from a clinic standpoint, and even also from like a club student activity standpoint. We would help other minority students to get into med school because the rate of getting into med school is really low, and it's especially low if you are coming from marginalized communities and if you're a person of color. It's not accessible, right? Like just the MCAT alone is so expensive, and to study for it, the resources are limited. So that's kind of the path of, I ended up in medicine. Now, do you want to know how I ended up leaving medicine?
Please,
is that the big question?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because you were so involved. Like,
So
okay,
involved.
I didn't expect this before. I thought you were a pre-med.
Yeah.
Like, you decided.
Took the classes.
Because, like, now I know some background. Like, there was a reason you were doing it, right?
Yeah.
Like, you were exposed to it as a child, translating in the in the clinic for your parents,
Right.
working in a clinic.
Yeah.
So you even had like an emotional attachment to this.
Absolutely.
So now for me, it's
Yeah.
actually even more of a bigger question. Is like,
Like,
why
why
did
did
that
they-
happen?
Right.
And you know what's even more shocking? So in an Afghan household, right, it's like you become a doctor, a lawyer, engineer. That's an ongoing kind of joke, right?
Yeah.
But it's the
It's
reality
true,
of
yeah.
it too. My parents never once wanted me to become a doctor. They never once pressured me. They had no interest of me being like, this is what you have to do. But they did see the night and day and hours and sweat and blood I had literally shed for this. So when you come to them and you say, I don't think this is for me, it's a bit of a shock. They're like, what do you mean? You've been wanting this since you were 12. Like, you've worked in every clinic, every hospital. Like, you have all this research. Like, you've done it all. Like, you're the perfect candidate. You even took the MCATs. Like, I even studied for the MCATs, and I took it. And I applied, and I had gotten in, and I ended up not.
Oh, wow.
I declined the offer, and I ended up not going.
That's bold.
That's
Yeah.
very
That's
bold.
bold. Yeah.
Yeah.
That
That's
takes,
very bold.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what it was? There's two things. One, when I graduated, I took like a year and a half off. And I was very naive in the way the system works, right? Like, again, immigrant household, you don't know kind of way America is really structured behind the scenes. So I go and I become a clinical director, and I worked with pharmaceutical companies, and I would work with these major, like the Novartis, the Eli Lilly's, and I would get contracts from them, right, to test their drugs in UC Davis. And that's a big thing for them because that's an academic hospital. So to get that label that a Stanford, a UCLA, UC Davis approves this drug, and it's been tested there, like that's a win for them. So they always really liked working with like our hospital. So that was kind of my role. I worked with pharmaceutical companies. We would recruit patients. We would kind of do testing of the drugs there, and it kind of, like that was my day to day. I started to realize the grayness of the system. Now, mind you, this is like this is around 2014. So technology is not that advanced in the healthcare system. Telehealth is not a big thing. You could see some of the shadiness that's involved, the lack of insurance for the patients that actually need it, or the lack of access to medicine for the patients that actually need it. And that was my goal, right? Because I came kind of from that community, and I said, I'm going to become a doctor for the uninsured population, or I was going to become a doctor for the folks that didn't have access to healthcare. But then I ended up working in dermatology, and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to work in skin cancer. And as I kind of had this dream of working with these communities, I realized more and more it makes it a bit difficult, right? Because there is kind of like nuances, right? Like I can't really work at a free clinic expecting to make money, right?
Yeah,
Or you work like, you know, a day-to-day sort of family practitioner. So much respect for all of them. But the amount of debt that you take to go to med school to pay that off, sometimes it's for me personally, it didn't make sense, you know? And then I also was thinking, I was like, the system feels so broken in the sense that there is a lack of use of technology, right? And I was like, if there's an opportunity where we can use tech as a catalyst, where we could do telemedicine and all that, I think the access to healthcare, the kind of the approach to it, or the level of care that people receive would get better. So I was like, I think I want to go change the system. Like I felt like I had more to offer than just go to med school, do my residency, and then see patients one-on-one. I was like, I'd rather change the system and make a bigger impact to thousands of people versus just the one-on-one patients I get to see, which either or route was still going to be impactful. And I felt like I could sleep well at night knowing that I get paid to make a difference in someone's life, right? Did I know how I was going to do that? Absolutely not. You know, did I know like, oh, I have the roadmap of like how I'm going to change the entire healthcare system in America? No. And so for me, it came down to, I remember going through my med school interview. I remember even getting the letter, and I just was not excited. And it was interesting because you apply to many med schools. So I had also gotten letters where I did not get in, and I felt relieved.
Oh, wow.
You know? Isn't that weird?
That's very
weird. And you know what I learned from that? You got to trust your gut. Just because, like, your gut is honestly going to kind of, like, it's like your kind of your sixth sense. It's going to lead you where you need to be. And I remember just thinking to myself, if I feel this way, now what's the next 4 years going to look like, right? And am I going to really put my best foot forward? Am I going to really be the best doctor if this is kind of how I feel, right? And how I felt about the system, and the way pharmaceutical companies were involved, and the way insurance companies were involved, and the way how it was limited. And I couldn't really maybe make that impact that I wanted to as a physician at that time. I'm like, are you going to feel fulfilled? And the answers just kept kind of revealing to me that it wasn't going to be the answer. And it was interesting because my mom's brother, I remember he was the one person who was like, she's very talented in business. And she told my mom, she's like, why are you pushing her to go? And she's like, I'm not pushing her. I just know she's been working so hard for this. And I don't want her to regret it if she walks away from it. Like, you know, like maybe it's like a temporary feeling.
Valid concern.
Yeah, total valid concern.
Yep.
But she was like, she's really good in business. She's like, and every time I've seen her being like a CEO of a company. Like, I've never seen her in medicine. And so he's like, just trust her. Like, just let her not, like, take the route that she needs to take.
Shout out Momo.
Yeah, shout out Momo. The youngest Momo, too.
Those the young ones.
It's the young ones. Yeah. So that's kind of, that was really what kind of, it was my gut feeling, one. And then two, what I wanted to do with it, I wasn't going to get the fulfillment out of it at the end of the day. Like, what my intention, the fulfillment just didn't match up. The math wasn't mathing.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to make this kind of decision? And did you have like
2 years?
2 years?
2 years.
Oh, wow.
I remember people are like, are you going to med school this year? Are you leaving this year? You know, like every time they'd ask me, like, you know, I thought like, yeah, like I thought you were going to leave. And I was like, oh, I've deferred it, you know?
Yeah.
And so it took me a while.
Did you seek any guidance from like people on the decision, or did you fully just wanted the decision to be made by you and just trust your gut?
I remember there was like there was a doctor that was a mentor to me. And I had worked for him for 5-6 years, and he almost was like, you know, he's like, you're like my daughter. And he goes, if you don't go to med school, he's like, I will be disappointed. He goes, because I worked really hard to like help you get here. He's like, I'd be really disappointed if you didn't go. But he goes, I also know you, and I know that if you wanted to do anything else, you would just be as equally successful. And I think that kind of gave me the confirmation, because it was fear. It wasn't like, oh, am I making the wrong decision? I knew I was making the right decision, but I had fear
About the other side.
about the other side, because it was unknown, right? Like, I had no idea about corporate world. I had no idea what those opportunities look like. All I knew for the past, since the age of like, through high school, through the 4 years of college, my networking, my opportunities, my resume was all medicine, you know? And so I'm like, I don't know how I can get out of this, because I've pigeonholed myself in this one industry, you know? And so I just didn't know what opportunities could look like outside of it. But he's like, I know, like, in anything else you do, you'll be successful. So he's like, if you walk away from it, I'm not worried if you do. But I'll be disappointed.
It seems like when you were kind of like weighing out your options, I feel like at one point, from what I heard, was you realized that, okay, I do want to make an impact on like these people in the healthcare industry, but maybe the impact I'm going to make on a one-to-one basis every time somebody comes to like see me at the clinic is not going to be as big as if I come from the outside and change like the whole, like, you know, the tech system around it.
Yeah.
And that's going to have a larger impact. Was that like one of the reasons?
You know what it was? At that moment, looking back, like, I didn't really think I was like, oh, I need to go into tech because it's going to change it. I was like, the system's broken.
Yeah.
Man, this is like before Obamacare. Yeah. Like, this is like...
so it was really broken.
Yeah, like, it was really broken, right? And so I'm like, the system is broken, and I think there's opportunities to fix it. I don't know how, but it's broken. And then when I was being a clinical director, everything was just so archaic. The softwares we use, the way we email things, the way we bookkeep things. I'm like, there has to be an easier way to do this. You know, like, everything just felt slow and old, and people in that industry, in that field, weren't willing to change. Honestly, it wasn't even maybe till the pandemic, and it forced everybody to get familiar with tech, right? Whether it was how you shopped, how you ordered things, how you seen your doctor. So for a while, it's hard to adjust, you know? But at that moment, in those years that I was working, I didn't have the answer, but I knew that I'm like, you can make one-on-one impact, or you can somehow change the system and make a greater impact. And I also had this feeling, I was like, I don't think, you know, there's this saying of everyone has their purpose in this world. I felt like, I was like, I'm not going to meet my full potential. Like, I feel like in this world that you come in, you got to push yourself, right? You got to put, like, the only competition you should have is you. Like, how do I learn more? How do I become better than yesterday? And that's the mentality I have every day for myself. But for me, I'm like, I know I have more to offer, you know? And it just, the fulfillment wasn't there, and the impact I wanted to make wasn't there. So yeah. But I have so much respect for all the doctors out there. Like, you know, like, it's amazing. Oh, yeah. Honestly, like through the pandemic and everything we were going through, the work they do, the hours they put in, I have such utmost respect for all of them that are doing the hard work. But I get to now, today, be on the other side.
Yeah. And so I know, like, because I know your family, I know you come from a family that's very business oriented, whether it's your mom or your dad or even extended family. So did that play a role in you, like, going into business? Because, I mean, after healthcare, you could have gone into other things, too, right? So did that play a role? And if so,
and I kind of did,
part of it?
Right?
Yeah.
Like, so right when I left, once I left, I quit my job. I was like, goodbye, I'm leaving. And I went, and my mom, she has, a restaurant in Sacramento, pretty familiar within like the local community. But I had noticed when I was at work, people would always talk about the restaurant. And when you're so, as children and parents, you're so wrapped up in your world, you don't kind of realize what your parents are up to. You're like, yeah, like my mom does this, like whatever. But people would be like, oh wow, like your mom owns this place. Like I love this place. I'm always there. And I was like, yeah, I'm like, that is my mom. I kind of felt like a celebrity for a little bit. And then, she would be feeding like, catering for the senators and catering for offices and big names. And the food quality is what kind of got it out there. And then when I quit my job, I had taken some time off. I was watching from the sidelines. And I'm like, there needs to be some changes. I was like, this can become really big. Mm-hmm. And then I told her, I was like, I'm going to join your business. And she was like, absolutely not. She was like, you did not leave your career and all that to come do this with me. Right. Yeah. And my mom, she has a passion for cooking and meeting people. And, and that's why she's been in this business for 15 years. But she was like, this is not what you're going to do. And I had to do some convincing to let me work with her.
This is reminding me of our trekking story.
Is this, you guys have done something similar?
No, we were like, me and Nuri in college, we were about to graduate, and like obviously we were both getting our degrees and we could have, got regular jobs and stuff, but we came up with this crazy idea of getting into this industry that was not meant for us. We didn't end up going through with it, but it reminded me because my parents were like, "What? We did not send you to college for this,"
Hey, at least what's the ambition, the idea behind it. It seems like you guys are a bit of an entrepreneur yourselves.
I think we try to be.
Yeah, we like to try new things.
Yeah.
It's fun. Yeah. I mean, it's life. You're only going to live it once,
Yeah.
You might as well try it.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing is like not regretting it later.
Yeah.
And having the opportunity now to do something. Whereas later, once you have kids and you're married and you have like all of these things taking all your time and not being able to do it then. Or, I mean, you could still do it, but it's just it'll just be a lot harder.
Yeah, it's a little bit more limited.
Exactly.
I think a common denominator here, and I heard it from you too, is getting over the fear.
Yeah.
Because that's what's holding you back. Like
it's always
the fear.
that.
Like, so when you heard from your the doctor that was working with you for like 6 years, telling you, reassuring you, like, hey, you're still gonna be successful.
Yeah.
You got over that fear a little bit. Sometimes you need someone to tell you. Sometimes you've learned from past that no, like this is just my brain messing with me.
It's interesting you say that. So then I lost my fear, but I still had my insecurities.
That's dangerous, right?
Like, don't get me wrong. Like, there are moments where I would think, I'm like, I'm not good enough for this. Like, why would someone want to, choose me for this opportunity? It was, and I'm happy to get into that. Like, as I started I ended up leaving medicine and went into business, but joining and scaling the restaurant business that my mom had. Mind you, my father is not a part of that business. He has his own career and his own businesses. But when I joined that, I actually realized what I was capable of doing. And I think that I surprised myself, like the way I was like thinking about the ideas, and I brought in more of like Uber was like a new concept, Uber Eats. Grubhub, like those things were just like baby companies at the time, right? And so I'm like, oh, well, we got to do third-party delivery, right? Like we got to do digital marketing. We have to get rid of these posters. We got to fix the pricing on these foods. Catering, how do you expand that? How do you, get more profit margin? It was very like innate, like it just is natural.
And you didn't have any knowledge of any of this stuff. You just naturally picked it up.
It was, what I did? It's funny. I used to go, there is a Sacramento, they call the Sacramento Business Development Center. And my dad had once forwarded me this email. He's like, hey, this place offers like free business advising. And they have like workshops and stuff. And I would go to the accounting classes. They were free workshops. I would go to the bookkeeping classes. I would go to the marketing classes. And I would learn from there. And then the team there became like advisors to me on what to do with the restaurant, how to scale it, what opportunities look like. That relationship saved our business during the pandemic, and that was 4 years later. So relationship building plays such an important role in these things. But that's what I did. One thing about me is if I don't have the answers, I'm going to find the answers. Like I'm a very go-getter type of person. I will find a way to get to point A to point B. And I think that's kind of maybe what my boss at the time was like, I know wherever you go, you'll be successful. Looking back, now I understand, what he meant by that.
Problem solving is the key, right?
Yeah. Like connecting with people. It's such a simple skill set that people don't have, being able to build relationships with folks. It's a talent in a sense.
Is there anything you would do differently during this time period?
No. Honestly, no. It was probably I've learned so much. That knowledge I learned in medicine, I use it day to day for myself. The relationships I've built, I still, touch base with them. It's opened other opportunity doors for me now as I work in tech. It's, as I kind of didn't finish the rest of like my career journey story, but you kind of mentioned like, oh, you didn't have knowledge, you just kind of went at it. There's some of it was natural. Some of it I would go to those classes, and then one day I get an email and they said, hey, you had applied to our med school, but have you ever considered our business school? And the idea of business school was so foreign to me. And I was like, no. I'm like, where in the world is this place even? Like, what? I was like, I applied here. I don't remember even clicking the buttons for this place. Like, And they reached out and I said, no, like I actually haven't. And they said, well, we'll fly you out. Come here, and just check it out. Like we have this huge recruitment weekend. Just see if you like it or not. Wow. And sometimes I'm a big faith believer. There's moments in my life, honestly, I don't know whose prayers are saving me, or maybe it's the good karma, but there's moments in my life, I don't know what, but opportunity just kind of falls on my lap, Mm-hmm. And in that, getting a random email saying come, and my mind wasn't even there, I said, okay, I'll come. And I was gonna go. I was like, "Oh, it's a free trip to New York." I was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna take this seriously." I went there. I remember flying. I went to Rochester, New York. I remember flying over the city. It was like fields. I was like, "There's no way I'm coming here." I was like, I don't know what this weekend is, but I was like, "There's no way I'm coming to this city." I ended up going to the weekend, and I was just amazed again, right? Like all is medicine, all is healthcare, and then you kind of do this family business and you scale it and you're learning and you're realizing you have a talent in it, and then all of a sudden you're in a business school professional format, and they're like, you can do this, you can have a career in this, and you come in, you learn all these things. And there were subjects that I was really craving to learn while I was running the business with my family. So it was interesting kind of how it played out. And then I ended up going to business school.
Up until that happened, did you have a plan, or was your plan just to keep growing the business?
No, I did have a plan. My second plan was I was planning to eventually work in a healthcare company. And I was job searching. I just didn't know where. And then as I was learning more and more about the business through the workshops and classes I was going to, business school kind of came to mind. Someone had suggested, and I kind of ignored it. Because I don't know, Afghans are like, oh, you're getting a business degree? What is that?
Yeah.
I do business every day. I own a shop here. We do business. That's what you went to university. So I respectfully, I really kind of had that stereotype. So I didn't take it seriously.
Yeah.
Until they invited me. And then when I went, I was like, oh, there's an opportunity. But my goal really was, I was like, oh, I'm going to work for a healthcare company, because that's where it would probably make sense for me to grow.
So when you did your business degree, you still did it focused on STEM, right? So there was some connection there.
So the other part, now that I remember, the other part of this, I remember I worked at a dermatology clinic. So I worked in a dermatology clinic. I was like, oh, I'm going to go into skin cancer. And I like, that's the area of focus. I'm going to do dermatology. And I was like, I'm going to have my own skincare line. I was obsessed with like skincare. And when I applied to business school, and I actually wanted to work for cosmetic companies because I was like, oh, I'm going to learn how they do it. So like I was going to work for like, not like a Sephora or like, you know, like a,
Yeah.
it was more of a high end medical grade sort
Oh,
of
I see.
skincare
Okay.
brands. Yeah.
I see. Okay.
And we always used to meet with them. We used to work with the pharmaceutical companies. So I was like, oh, maybe I could pivot into that and start my own business. But the goal was I was going to have my own business. I remember still to this day, it was funny, I was talking to someone recently. I still remember to this day, I had written an essay saying to my business school as part of the admissions that I'm going to start my own skincare brand. I graduated. I ended up in tech. I know. I like what the vision I had coming in to where I like left off.
Yeah.
It's amazes me just the MBA opportunity and the journey you go and the doors that open, the people you meet. I really went in with an open mind, and I'm so glad I did. And I wasn't like stuck on one thing. I really went in with an open mind, and it was the best 2 years of my life, honestly.
Wow.
Kind
More
of like
than
where,
undergrad?
yeah, oh yeah, 100%. Yeah,
That's the difference between that pre-med healthcare
yeah.
Yeah.
You know what
grind.
the difference is? You're right. But you know what else? Another thing is also, it's like when you love something, it doesn't feel like work.
That's so true.
You know?
That's so true.
And I remember going into medicine and I was like, damn, like I'm about to memorize another chemistry like formula. Like it just felt so rigid. Like there's only one way things get processed. There's only one way to heal someone. There's only one way an operation happens, right? And I'm like a very creative, out of the box thinking. So I kind of struggled with that a little bit, honestly. Maybe that's why I like the business side. That's why I was like, oh, I'm going to create my own skincare brand. And it allowed me to play around and maneuver. But I thought, you're young. You don't realize those, right? You're like, oh, this is kind of like a little hobby I have. It's an interest I have.
Yeah.
But you got to follow that gut instinct. That's what it is.
You know, what you just said kind of is what attracted me to the business world in general, is because just to give you a little background, I wanted to become a physical therapist. That's what I went into college, like majoring in kinesiology. But then like halfway through college, I just realized like I'm just so limited to like what I'm doing. And then when I thought about going into business, I'm like, there's just endless possibilities. You could be in any industry. You could solve any problem in the world.
Yeah.
You can do absolutely anything. And you could pivot. You could pivot at any moment if you don't like what you're doing.
Yeah.
So like what you just said right there, I feel like is such a big reason that people get into business, is because there's so many problems in the world, and at any moment you could be the person to solve it, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, totally. And it's also, the journey is really fun too, right? It's hard. It's hard because you're solving hard problems. And there isn't really a roadmap for it, right? Compared to in medicine, there's also very hard problems to solve there, but there's somewhat of like a roadmap, right? And so, I ended up in technology. And the reason why I did ended up in tech, and this is how the healthcare comes back, right? I don't know if it's haunting me back, but it came back to my life, right? I remember I was, so when you're in business school, your first year, you have all these core classes. And then you go to these conferences and you're basically recruiting. You're meeting people, you're building your network. And that's the whole thing about business school. You're building your network. It's about who you know at the end of the day. And that's what I learned about the way business school taught me, the way the world works, right? And like, how do you advance
reality,
in the world, right? Like reality. It's like, it's always about who you know and how you show up. And do you know your story, right? Like, what's your pitch? What are your skill sets? And the people that ended up being very successful are the ones who really knew themselves, right? And like what they were looking for.
Right.
Anyways, I ended up, my friend was like, hey, like, have you ever considered, like, I kind of heard your story and, you know, I kind of know what you do. He's like, have you ever considered working in venture capital? I'm like, well, what in the world is venture capital, right? And like, again, medicine mind.
Yeah.
Don't know anything about the stuff. I'm like, what in the world is venture capital? And she goes, it's kind of like Shark Tank. And I was like, yeah. I was like, I want to do that. I was like, I always watch Shark Tank, right?
This guy loves Shark Tank.
It's great, right? Obviously, the VC world is not exactly
It's a good
Shark
analogy.
Tank, but it's a good analogy.
Yeah.
You have people with a lot of money that invest and help you scale and build your business. So I was like, yeah, that's cool. Like, I want to do that. And then I ended up, my university had a venture fund, student-run venture fund. I was a part of that. It exposed me to meeting all these different startup founders. It exposed me, how do you look at a company? How do you analyze it? How do you do the market research for it? How do you identify that this is the right person to run this company so it can become the next Uber, right? Like, what are the things you should be looking for? And then now that you have it, now go to your board, like your investors, and pitch it and tell them that they should invest their money into this company. It taught me so many great life skills, hard and soft skills that I learned from that experience. And then I ended up interning at a VC firm in Silicon Valley, or actually Oakland. Let me be clear, before the Bay Area people come for me.
They're so particular, right?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
So they're based in Oakland, and I worked there in the summer. They invested in tech companies and like loved the experience. And I got to look at health companies that were in tech. And so they're like, that was like your background. So like, that would be a great opportunity for you. I also got to look at sustainability companies. Like, that was the partner I was assigned to, was sustainability. But when I was working for the venture fund for the school, I got to look at a lot of healthcare companies too. So it kind of came full circle a little bit.
Yeah, and sustainability is like so big right now because especially with tech and stuff, like, let's put this whole, healthcare or clinic system organization on this tech, but if they're
like
not able to use it,
you're able to use your app now to talk to your doctor. That stuff didn't exist back when I was working in the hospital. Like, that wasn't a common thing. Now it's very
COVID
common.
really pushed this, right?
Yeah,
it kind of pushed the whole telehealth.
I think COVID made people to adapt to it. But during the time I was working, which is around kind of the COVID time, you're right, but there were already a lot of healthcare companies on the rise. So it was really great for me to kind of see the full circle and being able to use that very specific industry knowledge now to invest in healthcare tech companies, sustainability companies, female healthcare companies, right? So yeah, it kind of came full circle.
Did that lead you into your current role at Microsoft?
Yeah.
Is there a connection?
Yeah. So then I ended up asking my the investor I had worked for. I was like, hey, how do I become like a really good investor? And he goes, he had built a really successful company. He goes, I became a great investor because I did it. I actually worked for one. I built one. So I know how to advise one, right? Like, you can't advise someone on something you've never done.
Right.
So, and he just kind of learned that was his ammo. Because he's done it, he knows what he's looking for. So because if you want to become a better investor, like, go work for a tech company. And then Microsoft. Microsoft comes in the play, and
so it's just part of the plan right now.
It's part of the plan.
Wow.
Yeah. So now I it's funny. I've been at Microsoft for 3 years. I work in the cloud and AI industry. AI is a very sexy word these days. But I work for Azure, and we work in the customer success unit. So I don't get to work one-on-one with customers, and our customers are big Fortune 500 customers, right? So their accounts are huge, millions and millions of dollars involved. I work more so in a strategy role, in an operational role, where we identify from end-to-end sales, right? Pre and post sales. How do we ensure that our customers' journey is successful and they're happy with their product or their service at Microsoft? How do we ensure our field, like our salespeople or engineers, are supporting our customers? And if they're limited on resources or tools, how do we enable that? So you're kind of sitting in a strategy/implementation role at a global level. And that's the cool part, is that I get to see what Korea is doing, what Western Europe is doing, what Middle East is doing.
Wow.
And you kind of compare the numbers and you see where are we struggling and where are we accelerating and how do we learn from one another at a global scale.
Is one of the products you work on Dynamics?
It's one of the many products. So
Okay.
like Azure, right? Azure is like a big umbrella term, and Dynamics is kind of our modern work umbrella or our category. So Dynamics would fall under that.
I only bring that up because we're doing it, and we did it in the past. We did a Dynamics implementation
Yeah.
for our client. So the one
Because
that
you work at
Deloitte,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, so you'd be one of our partners that we work with.
and I know the implementation we did. I don't know if it's in Dynamics history or if it's just within our company, but it was the largest Dynamics implementation done
Wow.
for the product in, I
That's
think,
amazing.
America. And again, I don't know if that's just within Deloitte or that's in general.
Oh, in general. Yeah, it's insane. Like the contracts we sign and the work that these engineers and our partners do together, it's a lot. I mean, it's taking thousands and thousands of people and basically changing their tools, their access to technology. You know, we could say migrating them to the cloud is like a fancy term we use.
Yeah.
But we kind of there's a lot of folks involved. And then we kind of sit at the top and we see at a bird's eye level like what's going on, right? Or like
strategy folks.
Why is this account struggling so bad? Or like why is this area doing so well? Like, you know, so it's really cool to kind of, I've learned so much in the 3 years I've been there, but I have been missing the startup world. I have been missing the VC world. And about a year ago, I got this full circle. The place I used to do workshops at, they tapped me on the shoulder and they said, "Where are you these days?" I was like, "Oh, I'm back in Sacramento." Because I moved to New York for business school. I was like, "Yeah, I'm back in Sacramento." They're like, "Would you like to come on and be a business advisor for like the city of Sacramento and work with specifically our startup tech companies because you have now experience in VC?" And at first I said, "There's no way I have time for this." And then she said, "Well, there's one more special project we want you to work on." And I said, "Okay, what is it?" And she's like, "I think you will say yes to my offer once I tell you." And she goes, "We have a program for the Afghan refugees. And I know your family has a lot of businesses and whatnot, so we used to work with you in that sort of capacity." They said, "We are hosting classes and we are supporting them and teaching them how to start their own business. And we would love for them to see an as successful Afghan, entrepreneur, business owner or someone that works in corporate to come not only be an example, but also to teach them." And I said, "Okay, when do I start?" Right? Like there was no,
it's hard to say no.
Yeah, it was no brainer.
Yeah.
I'm like for me, honestly, because I've been through all of it, I've always had non-Afghan mentors. And it's not really by choice. I think it was just lack of access to them,
Yes.
right? We're so spread out just to the nature of what our country went through and what we've been through. Like, it's just, we're all over the world. You don't know who is doing what are they up to, right? And sometimes we have some of our successful folks, they're maybe unapproachable at times, right? Or there are folks, unfortunately, sometimes in our Afghan community that are not as helpful, right? There is always that sense of, I don't want to call it animosity, but there's just always like, oh, she's doing better, he's doing better than me. I don't know, and maybe it's not an Afghan thing. Maybe it's like a human thing. It's a human thing.
Yep.
We naturally do that. So I just naturally, I didn't really have a lot of Afghan mentors in my life, and I felt my journey was always really lonely. And for me to be able to give back to even being on here, or for me to even be able to give back to the community, or just even take a quick phone call if someone has a question, it really, really makes my day. It's such a privilege because it reminds me when I was looking for that person. you know, I think we were talking about this earlier. It makes such a big difference when you see someone who looks like you who made it.
Yes.
And there's a lot of folks who reach out to me about, I want to work at Microsoft. I want to go into VC. I want to go to business school. I don't have the courage to tell my parents I don't want to do this career. How did you do it? And I will always find time. I always will find time to have those conversations and guide them through it. Because I'd never really had that myself.
I'm curious, when you're doing advising for like this program you're talking about, they're Afghans, right? Or mostly like newly arrived Afghans.
Yeah, newly arrived Afghans.
So
it's all in Farsi too.
That's what I was gonna ask is how's the language barrier? Because I know we speak it, but we grew up here. I mean, they went to school there. They have words.
They're
Tell me a little bit about it. How was it at first? Have things changed? Have you learned a lot?
You know, imposter syndrome, right? I have the knowledge that I'm supposed to be teaching them. Yeah. Yet I have the imposter syndrome of feeling like, and it wasn't that I don't think I was going to teach them right. I'm like, oh my God, my Farsi's not going to be as, I have great Farsi, but I'm like, it's not going to be as good as the way they speak. Yeah. Right. And so I remember they had a translator, Hasina John, love her to death. She was a translator to translate my Farsi.
Oh my God.
It was very funny because I remember she was like, how John? She's like, Farsi بسیار خوبه. She's like, میفهمن. She's like, don't worry about it. She's like, you did a great job. Like, you don't need me. I was like, no. I would ask her. I'm like, can you please translate that one more time? Yeah. And then it's funny because the students, mind you, the students are like my aunt and uncle's age, right? And so they would call me Ustad.
Oh.
And it was the cutest thing. Oh. And then I would get embarrassed because I'm like, I'm younger, but I have to call them by their first names, right? So I'd call them Khanem, whatever, you know. But it was very sweet because I would have one-on-one advising sessions with them, and then they would go, you know, it is like it's such a proud moment for us, like right? And then you ask and you say, well, why? And they're like, we're so used to seeing foreigners in these nonprofits, these organizations, ever since we've landed. We always have translators, but we don't see someone like us sitting on the other end and actually doing the work, right? And so for the first time to have a teacher, quote unquote, to come and teach them margins, gross sales, you know, like we're talking like, you know, cash flow statements with them. I'm like teaching them this in Farsi. They were just amazed by it. And they're like, they wanted to learn more about me, my journey, you know, how can they be where I am today? And I'd always reassure them, I'm like, there is many of me today. I'm like, I'm not the only one. There's so many, honestly, successful Afghans that we see. It makes me so proud. I love seeing one of us winning. And I'd give them that reassurance that they're hungry. And I was like, you're not far from it. I was like, I wish my parents or I wish my uncles or, you know, my cousins kind of had these opportunities that you have. Because when I feel like when they came, it was not. They didn't even have translators, right? Like our language, Farsi, Dari. Yeah, it was us. Yeah. And now they go, do you want Pashto? Do you want Dari? And you're like, wow, we even have different dialects, right? So it's interesting that they kind of have it a bit better than us. But it was a cool experience to teach them.
Is it done?
The program is done, but it starts annually, so it's going to happen again. It's part of the Majlis Salam, which is part of the city of Sacramento. Great mosque, very involved, and they had kind of supported the funding. And once they finished their business plan, we would work with them to get a business license, and then they would get funding. So they would get like about $200-300, which is what the mosque kind of had. You know, it's limited amount, but that $200-300 is a huge difference for them, right? It allows them to apply for their business licenses. It allows them to be a sole proprietorship. To start something. And you know what a lot of the businesses were? It was, I make turshi from my house and I want to sell it, you know, or I make cake and kulcha, like I want to sell that, or I want to do daycare. I want to do e-commerce. One girl, she was a talented artist. She had a very popular YouTube, TikTok page, and she wanted to sell her art. and she had just come like 6 months ago, you know? So it's really interesting of the amount of talent we have. And I was really proud because a lot of them are women. And then they're like, I want to help my family. I want to help my husband because I see him working day and night, but like I feel useless being at home, but I don't have a car. I can't drive. And in California, you need a car to get around, right? And like I want to be able to do something just to make some money to support my family. And we would think if we gave them a worksheet to work on, it wouldn't get done. They would come. It was done. Like and they're like, yeah, I had my daughter help me write this. And then you'd have to spell things out in English with them. You know, it was a very sweet moment. I saw myself in a lot of their children. But yeah, it was probably one of the most rewarding things I've gotten to do today and like till this point, honestly.
The impact you make on your community is different than if you make at work, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it's nice. It's really funny when I was reading out your introduction, I said something about, I almost said, and she makes, you know, and she's very involved or interested in making an impact in her company. While that is true, and it was actually, I misread it. I was saying in her community, right?
Yeah.
Which is completely different,
Yeah,
right? People
it is.
want to make a bigger impact in their community, like
Yeah.
in the people that they see. You know, it
also
feels better.
It hits different.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
it really does hit different when you see you're able to help your own. I still to this day, like I get to work with all sorts of companies for the city of Sacramento and advising startup companies. But when I got to do that specific project, it was worth it. And so mind you, I was working like a 9 to 5, and then 6 to 9, I was a Farsi instructor teaching marketing, teaching cash flow, teaching like, you know, what's an LLC, and these are such foreign terms to them, right? And you could see the fear of, oh my God, I have to pay $800, like my annual sort of franchise, you know, tax fee every year, and like, where am I going to get $800, right? So it's like you have to teach them, like, no, there's another opportunity. So it's honestly really, it's been really rewarding. Tiring. It takes a lot because you're teaching them how the system works.
Yeah.
It wasn't even just teaching the basics of business. It was like teaching them how do you adjust to life in America a little bit.
I totally feel you. In my family's business, we also deal with a lot of, you know, Afghans.
Yeah.
And it's more, like we're doing more than just doing our job. You
Yeah.
know, we're also sometimes having to explain people why they have to pay tax.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like as a just one example of it.
100%,
So
yeah.
yes, it can be very draining.
Yeah.
It can be very tiring, but you know, it is what it is. At the end of the day, like we'll get some sawab from it, and it feels good. One of the things I noticed, you said that they were very proud to have like a Afghan person teaching them. That like usually it's foreigners. I also feel like they were even more proud and even more shocked that you were an Afghan woman teaching them business. Right.
And the young girl in my class said exactly that.
Yeah.
She goes, you're a woman and you're teaching this.
Yeah.
And she goes, how did you make it this far? Like, how did you go to all these universities? And she was amazed by that. Yeah, they were shocked by that.
Yeah, because like traditionally, first of all, like, I mean, we're even having the issue right now in our country is women are not even getting higher education. So putting that aside, like, there's definitely something ingrained in the culture that's totally against female education.
Yeah.
But even coming here, like, I know usually families are like, okay, like the traditional route for females is go into healthcare or something. They never encourage
something
business.
safe.
Yeah. So seeing you doing something completely like abnormal, right? What are like the challenges you faced? I mean, not even just in business, but even when it comes to education, like whether it's moving out for college, like these are all taboo, like in our like community,
100%,
you know?
100%. You know, my undergrad years, I didn't even get to move out. I actually was commuting from home back and forth.
Yeah.
I think it's like a two-prong approach a little bit. I think being a woman of color, a woman that has a foreign name, I think that already has its challenges when you're in the American society, because you're easily labeled, you're not one of us, right?
Yes.
Like, you don't look like us, your name is different, you know, you speak another language. So it's that to be able to blend in and adapt and kind of acclimate to is already its challenges. And then for me, I was working in the world of venture capital, which is highly male dominant, highly white male dominant, right? And like women get like 2% of all the money that's allocated annually in VC just to women, and barely any of that goes to women of color. So to have women in that space was challenging. I would be sitting next to the billionaires and millionaires of the world, right? At the same table having dinner with them, and I always felt I was the odd one out. And that's not even just being one, but it's because I was an Afghan woman, an Afghan Muslim woman, right? And so they're like, some topics, I was like, I don't know if I should talk about that. What if it rubs them the wrong way, right? Like, what if that limits my opportunities? But I've learned through that the more authentic I was, the more people felt connected to me, right? The more they're like, oh, you are different, but wow, we actually relate on some things, right? So I had to learn how to navigate that. Then there's the aspect of the second prong of being an Afghan woman in the Afghan community, which is also challenging because there's always going to be a double standard. Whether you are in a American society, an Afghan society, unfortunately, this is kind of almost statistically, women tend to kind of bring other women down more than men do, you know? And that's the sad part. Like, I've also seen a lot of women not being a girl's girl, right? And they see another girl doing something, wearing something, talking to someone, wanting to pursue something, and they put her down. And then there's a double standard of, oh, well, if she does that, then, you know, it's not okay. But if the brother does that, or if the cousin, the boy cousin does that, it's okay. You know, like it's not okay, but it's not a big deal, right? Compared to if she did that.
They'll turn another way.
Yeah.
You know.
So it's like you constantly feel this pressure. At least I have. I'll speak from my own experience, and I have been very grateful. Like, I'm so blessed that I have very wonderful parents who've really been open-minded. They've supported us to kind of blend in this Afghan American identity, right?
Yeah.
And that's a very hard space to kind of navigate sometimes. Even our mannerisms between the two cultures are different, right? Like, what you do there, you're not standing up for yourself. You do that in the Afghan community, you're going to stand up stand up for yourself in front of your parents. You're the most disrespectful person, right? Like, how do you? It's such an interesting like identity and community to navigate, honestly. But as a woman, I feel like it just adds an extra layer. You kind of you got to be buttoned up, right? You know, you have making sure your family's reputation, and then it's like your own reputation, and then it's your community's reputation, and then it's, you know, you're in work and you have your professional reputation. There's always some sort of hat and some sort of, like, I want to say, like a bar that you have to hit, you know, and that makes it. And then they're like, be your authentic self. That's what they end, like, be your authentic self.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, you know, how am I, when you kind of are in a rigid box? And that's been a challenge. And I am a big proponent of this. Honestly, all these transitional phases in my career, moving different cities, understanding my Afghan American identity, understanding what it means to be a child of immigrants, all of this to a certain degree has some sort of trauma, right? And I think that's a very big word, because you think when you say that word, it has to be something grand. But being able to kind of, the experiences we all have, whether it's good or bad, there is some degree to it. And I wouldn't have been able to make it today to where I am today if I didn't have professional coaching. I'm a big proponent of that. I know people are against therapy. They think it's like medicinal, and you know, that's like a mental health is not a big supportive sort of topic in our community. But there's different types of forms of it, right? There's like psychology, there's coaching, and there's executive coaching for professional use. I would not be where I am today if it wasn't for having a coach to kind of get me through the decisions I need to make, and not have fear, to how do I navigate the corporate world? How do I present myself professionally? You know, how do you kind of understand the Afghan American identity, and what I thought was normal wasn't normal, right? Like that's all I had ever known. And to have someone to speak to that's neutral, and to help you navigate that, and they're proactive with you about it, has been very, very helpful in my life. So I'm a big supportive person when it comes to these things. I always tell young Afghans that are going to corporate America, get an executive coach. It really helps propel your career in the right direction at a faster speed.
Go ahead.
How did you learn about like all of these things that you're mentioning? Like, did you just learn this through trial and error, or did someone?
Yeah, that's a good question.
You know, okay, you want to know the personal coaching or the professional coaching? Because there's like the access to all that stuff, or
Yeah, the professional coaching.
Like the options that you have. Like even I call you sometimes and I'm like, hey, like
Yeah.
what are my options here? And you have like 5 options, you know, like how
There's
did
always-
you get access to this information?
Yeah, you know, again, I picked the right mentors in my life, and I picked them where I felt comfortable. It wasn't because this person had some grand title next to their name, or they're the richest person in the room, or they're the most successful person in the room. It was, I felt comfortable where I could put all those guards that I have, these titles I wear, I could drop all that and be vulnerable and be like, listen, I need help. Like, I'm lost. Like, I don't know if I'm good enough for this. I don't know if I'm making the right decision walking away from this. Or there's a comment that was made and it kind of triggered me, you know, like why does that trigger you? Like, why is that a big issue? And so being able to talk to someone that I felt comfortable kind of opened up, well, hey, you should consider this, right? But one thing that really, really made a difference in my life was business school, especially for my professional side, and then working in venture capital. When you work in VC, you work with a lot of money. You work with billions and millions of dollars. Like these are really insanely rich. And their level of thinking is different. Their conversations are different. Their dinners and events are different. And I think sitting in the room with those folks, the word no was non-existent. Like, what do you mean, no, I can't do that? Of course I can do that, right? And I was like, oh, wow, that's a different way of thinking. And then I would ask them, I'm like, you know, how did you get here? Because I was so amazed by the way they approached stuff and the way they did things. And I'm like, how did you get to where you are today? And a lot of them would tell me I had a similar moment where things were not working out in my life. I had a low moment in my life too. And some folks would recommend other things, but every time I had spoken to someone who is successful in the corporate world, they're like, I had an executive coach. You know, I had a professional recruiter where I told them exactly what kind of job I wanted, and they went and they headhunted that opportunity for me. Or, you know, and sometimes a lot of that requires money, right? But they had all mentioned, like, I had an executive coach, and it allowed me to kind of be where I am today. They helped me navigate it. How do you speak to certain people? How do you build sponsors? How do you build mentors? So being in the VC culture, it's always networking. You're always talking to people. You're always going to dinners. You're always trying to find the next hot company to invest in. And then you get exposed to, you build relationships, and they talk about what they've been through, what they do. And then you get amazed. And then you realize how powerful money is, unfortunately, right? Like, it opens up door, and, you know, people that give you money to invest in companies and they have high equity in your company, they have the final say in what's going to happen with that. So I realized how the real world works, whether I liked it or not. But from those experiences, to answer your long-winded answer, but it was my experience and being exposed to that at a young age that I realized, oh, they have resources that got them there. That's not just mom and dad's money. Yeah, mom and dad's money like allow them to buy things or get somewhere, but they had resources and connections that opened doors for them.
Have you met a super successful woman during your time in VC? And like, if you have, was their journey different? Did you ask what worked for them, and was it different?
Yeah, I have. I've met many successful women. I can't drop names. I've met successful women that are somewhat almost like, I don't want to say celebrity, but like in the tech business world, they're very well known. And to some degree, no, I couldn't relate to them realistically, because they didn't come from immigrant parents. They didn't come from living in New York City and making it in, day out. They didn't have to deal with another identity. They understood the white culture, right? Or they understood like whatever they identified with. I struggled in that sense a little bit, where I couldn't connect with them, but they were very successful. But what I did connect with them, right? And see, that's the thing. You can't see things in, it's always multifaceted. You can't see things in one way. Like, you don't have the same story as me, so we don't connect. But what I did see was that they were a woman in a very heavily male-dominant space. And they all taught me, how do you maneuver that? How do you sit in a room? Sometimes you're the only woman in that room. And how do you ensure that you don't end up being the secretary where you're taking notes and like, ordering food? Like, how do you ensure that you're sitting in a room and you're able to be taken seriously and that there's respect, right? They taught me a lot of those skill sets of navigating that, and making decisions and speaking up, and how do you, deal with conflict, which I really, really do appreciate. Yeah. But I haven't met and I hope I mean, I know there are, but I haven't met them personally.
Yeah.
I know there are very successful Afghan women out there, but in the spaces that I was working in, it was majority white. And then I'd meet a few successful Hispanic, Latina women. I would meet African American Black women that were successful, and I always had utmost respect for them, because I know to some degree our journeys, our connections are probably a little bit more similar. But yeah, that's kind of been my experience.
One final question, just on this topic, and then I'll let you transition it. But of all of those successful women that you met, was there one like characteristic that all of them possessed? Was there like one thing that was just common amongst all of them?
Yeah. They were not afraid to speak up. And I think coming from, maybe this is like a personal thing, so I don't want to label anybody, but growing up as a little girl, which people are like, that's hard to believe. When I was in school, at home I wasn't. At home I would talk people's ears off. But in school, I was very shy. I was always afraid to raise my hand. I knew the answers to everything, but I would just be so shy to raise my hand. Or if someone gave me the wrong change, I didn't have the courage to say, you gave me the wrong change. I would just walk away with it. Like I didn't have that in me to kind of speak up. And I don't know why, but one thing I noticed sitting in those rooms, sitting in those meetings, they knew how to work the room. They knew how to make the right connections, find the right people to back them up. They were smart with the way they operated, the way they presented. Their communication skills were on point. But the primary thing that I noticed in all of them was that if you were wrong, they were not afraid to tell you were wrong. And if you were right, they were not afraid to add on to their reasonings and their opinions onto why that opinion is right or why that approach is right. And I think that's what I've learned that was so incredibly valuable as I even navigate my career in the corporate world, is knowing what you want and speaking up and saying, like, that is what I want.
And for someone who's not naturally like that,
yeah,
would you advise them to work on?
Yeah. Recently I went to the Afghan American conference, and I was sitting on a STEM panel.
Wait, the one that just passed in San Diego?
In San Diego.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was sitting on the STEM panel, and there was this really young, sweet gentleman that came up, and he was like asking me questions. And then his last question, he goes, how do I get better at socializing with people? I really struggle with it. And I was shocked. I was like, you just had like such a great conversation with me. I was like, I don't think you have that problem at all. It's interesting that I feel like sometimes we doubt ourselves, right? We think that we don't have a certain skill set, or we feel that I hate the word imposter syndrome, but we feel the imposter syndrome. We're like, oh, maybe I'm not saying the right thing. How I've learned to kind of navigate through that is, one, I realize people are like, especially in like meetings and corporate world, I realize that people half the time are in their own world. You know what I mean? And I promise you, what you're going to say, they're really not going to remember like in the next hour. They're going to hop onto the next call, next meeting, next whatever. So I realize that the world doesn't evolve around me, right? Sometimes something you wear, something you do, you think like, oh my God, it's the end of my career. It's the end of whatever, right? But you'll be surprised how small that is to other people. And I learned that when I talk, I'm going to talk like, I've been in rooms with a lot of, successful investors, and a lot of them were predominantly men, and they would just kind of obliviously speak and say whatever's on the top of my head, and you'd be like, did he just say, like, that was so inappropriate, like, did he just say that? And obviously I speak filtered, but I sometimes put myself in the mind of, okay, what's gonna happen? The worst, they're gonna say no, right? Or they're gonna say that's not the greatest idea. What I've learned from that is, if you can just be able to think of, it's not the end of the world, and just be able to speak up your mind, and also not doubt yourself. Sometimes you think you don't have the ability, you do. It's just, it becomes like, the more you do it, it becomes natural, right? And it kind of becomes second nature. So my advice, I struggle with it too, is I started to realize that, whatever, I'm just going to unmute myself, because, I work with virtual. I'm going to unmute myself, and I'm going to say the comment, or I'm going to give my thoughts, or I'd be in a room, I'd raise my hand, and I realized more and more people would nod and they would agree. And they're like, oh, we're so glad you share that opinion. And that's like that positive reinforcement that you get, right? And there are times I've said things like, no, that's wrong. Like where was your thinking on that, right? Yeah. And I'm like, oh, I'm glad you've told me, because there's other people in the room that have probably thought something similar, right? So it's hard, but what I've really told myself, I've been in rooms where other people have said things that they probably shouldn't have said, or they've said things that were really great. And I'm like, okay, if they can do it, what's the difference between me and that person, right? Like, I'm not any less than that person. And then the second thing is just being able to, it's a comment, it's a saying, like, just say what you need to say. The worst that's going to come out of it is they're going to say no, right? So that's kind of what I've been doing, is just putting myself in other scenarios that I've been in, and being like, if they can do it, I can do it too. Like, if he's a billionaire and he's doing it, like, like, he clearly got somewhere successful. Yeah. To like, there is a trait he had, right? So maybe adopt some of that positive trait that you see in someone. You're like, oh, I want to be like that. Then practice it. It becomes a habit eventually.
I like that.
One of the things you mentioned earlier is, like, you can relate to a lot of these women to a certain extent, that you're women, but at the end of the day, you guys are different, right? The whole white culture. Yeah. And when it comes to the corporate world, I feel like more than any other fields, the white culture is very dominant, because it's all about socializing, networking, dinners, and that's where, the white culture really shines, and that's, they network with each other, over their favorite sports teams, or, whatever, growing up, Christmas, Thanksgiving, whatever it is, right? How do you navigate being an Afghan and knowing that you cannot relate to a lot of these things, right? Sometimes that if you're really going to be authentic, you're going to be really different. And you mentioned that, previously too, that, you are different, but as long as you're just real and authentic, they might just appreciate that. Yeah. At what point, like, where do you guys kind of draw the line on being, like, super Afghan or, like, American? And this is like almost a crossover. It's not just at work. Yeah. I'll tell you guys a funny story about myself.
Okay.
First time I worked remote for, like, as soon as I graduated, for a while, and then I got a new job. I was still working remote, and we had our first in-person meetup, and I'm pretty Afghan. Like, I've embraced being Afghan, right? So I walk into the room, everybody's just sitting down, and this is the first time everybody here has seen each other in a long time. Yeah. It's my first time, but these people only see each other, like, once every few months. Yeah. So I walk in, and everyone just kind of looks at me like this, I'm like, what? Like, it's my first time. I've been on
Yeah.
calls with all you guys for so long, you know?
Yeah.
I was like, I need more than just
Like,
that,
it's
you
the
know?
hi.
So I went up and I shook everybody's hand and said hi, you know?
Yeah.
And then I sat down. And then I slowly started realizing, like, that was just the Afghan in me, you know? Like, that's not how it is, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm just wondering, like, where do you draw the line? Like, how Afghan are you going to be? Like, at what point are you just going to be like, you know, and just
Yeah,
day,
yeah.
you know? Have you guys dealt with anything like that?
I'll let you answer. Have you?
I feel like maybe I have like similar things like that.
Yeah.
Like, but honestly, I adapt pretty much to like my team. Sad to say, but yeah.
Yeah, go if they're not shaking hands, I'm not shaking hands.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I'm like that too now, but it's like, you know, like at some point you're just adopting, you know, you're just taking that.
Yeah. But you know, the other thing is it might be a situational thing, right? It's also a team culture thing. There might be a team culture in your very same company that's like dapping each other, like, what's up, bro? Like, how you been? And you're like, whoa, what is this, right? It might just be like the culture of that company or that team that's like that. So it might not necessarily always be like that. However, I like your question of like, how do you kind of draw the line, right?
Yeah, where do you balance?
What I've done personally is like the things you were saying of like getting up and saying hi, right? It might be an Afghan thing. It might be your mannerism. It might be your family morals and values of what they've taught you, how to say hello to someone. I've seen some Afghans that are like, salam. What's up, guys? You know, like a little wave, and you're like, oh, like that's not an Afghan thing. That's like a mannerism thing, right? So it's like, how do you kind of define what's Afghan and what's not? That's the next level of question, right? I think being authentic Afghan in corporate or just in like workspaces, I'll always have my traditional like values and mannerisms, and I do that because that's my reputation, right? Like how I show up. I don't care if like that is what you do or you don't do, but like what my reputation's on the line, like what I want to be known for, and when I leave this company or I leave this team, I want to be on good terms, right? And I want to be known for, you know, oh, like, yeah, she was that person that did this. Like, they might remember you as a guy who's, like, really friendly and warm and just says hi to everyone. And that's a great thing. Because you know what teams in corporate America hire? I mean, what they're missing is personality.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
They're missing personality. And when you're the different person, whether that being how you grew up, whether that being your Afghan side, it's what's going to be the X factor. And I always say this when I'm helping people get into business school or getting into corporate America. I'm like, what's your X factor? Like, what makes you different? Everyone has a resume. Everyone has the skill sets. But what makes you stand out? And that's going to be you, right? So when it comes down to where do you draw the line, I think you draw the line of whenever you feel like your reputation, would you want to be known for that? Like, is that a good way to be known for, labeled for, right? I say that with caution because I'm not saying you should worry about what other people think of you. That's not what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. But how you carry yourself, right, matters. I've seen people that got promoted because they dress well and they play the part. They're not smart. They don't know the numbers. They don't know how to run the business, but they look the part, right? And that's their rep. That's part of their rep. It's part of their brand. Let me say that. I don't want to say reputation.
Yeah,
yep. What do you want your brand?
Because you have to build your brand.
Yes, that's what the right term is. What's your brand, right? And your brand can be the Afghan mannerism. It can be the fact that, you know, you're humble, that you've had, you know, really humble beginnings and you've been through a lot and you don't take things for granted. That's part of your brand. You know, like there's a humility in you. There is, you know, Afghans, we love to dance and party. You know, you're kind of the life of the party when you guys are at a corporate dinner. You know how to bring people together. You know how to involve people in conversations. These are like soft skills that I kid you not. This is not a cultural or like a certain group thing that most people do not have. And if you have that, I promise you, you're going to skyrocket. And I actually discourage you from assimilating and becoming one of them,
Buttoning
right?
up that side of yourself.
Yeah, like you, like. Nuri's like, are you talking about me? I was gonna say, like, try to be that person that stands out, right? Like, what's your brand when you walk in that room? And sometimes, on like in Nuri's cases, maybe it is like, hey, he's like, hi, like it's just like that's the way you say hi. But maybe your brand is your level of knowledge. Maybe your brand is the way you present things, or the formalities you have, the respect you have for maybe the elders in the company. You know, like here, there's a woman, like, come take my seat. Some people don't have the decency to do that, right?
Oh my God.
Like things like that, right? Like this kind of our culture mannerism that I think really plays a role. And at the end of the day, when you in any workplace you're in, it's about like, what's your brand? Like, who do you want to be known for? What do you want to be known for? And then the thing is, right, like in my life, I've learned that in amazing ways is I had built really great relationship with people that I know if I call them today, they'd pick up the phone, right? And I know if there is an opportunity that opened up or something they were thinking of, they would think of me. And that's, again, it's about building the brand. Where the situation is ideal, no. There's sometimes I hated a certain job I was working. There's sometimes I was like, what in the world is this person doing, right? But there is an approach. There's a technique, right? It's the way you say things. It's the way you communicate. It's about being highly, having high emotional intelligence, right? Like all of this stuff is really, really essential to kind of how you present yourself in the community, in your family, in a relationship, in your company.
I think what I really took from that was like, as an Afghan, we have a lot of traits, right? Whether they're good or bad. Take the good ones with you to work, right?
Yeah.
Like being hospitable, warm, nice, fun. We love, like you said, we love the mimonis we throw down. Take all that with
Our
you.
Hospitality.
Yeah. Don't take your Afghan time with you, right? You can't run on Afghan time. So yes, draw the line time there, I guess, right?
Gotta be punctual.
So be punctual, and I think that's a great answer. Actually, I think that's something all Afghans should think about: is how can they use, because like we have a disadvantage being Afghan here.
Yeah.
But how can we make that an advantage?
Right.
Those are those things.
You don't realize that there's so many people, like when I was in business school, they're like, you're the first Afghani I know, right? Or like, you're the first Afghan I know. And I'm like, first of all, it's not the right term, but the thing is, it's like, and because I'd be like, come, I'll make you some dinner. Come try our food. Yeah. I'm like, it's Ramadan. Yeah. Like I am, and that's my faith. That has nothing to do with being Afghan. They're non-Muslim Afghans. But I'm like, this is what I do. Come have like, a meal with me. I never feared about talking about my culture, my upbringing. I mean, I'm on a podcast talking about my life on this, right? Like I never feared about talking about a lot of these things. And I think that also can be an X factor to how you stand out and how you build relationships, but also you kind of represent the next experience that person will have with an Afghan, right?
Yes.
So like they meet me, and then Nuri ends up in New York, ends up meeting the same person I once went to class with. And they're like, oh my God, I once had a classmate and she was Afghan. And like, I know that you guys have these like beautiful weddings, or I know you guys do these things, and you're going to feel, wow, already instantly connected. But like, because they've had a great experience with me and their impression on the Afghan culture and the Afghan American identity and the difficulties that we experience, they will have much more empathy, and you'll probably feel more connected to that individual, right? And so I also think about building your brand, especially as an Afghan American. It's also about building like onto the Afghan American brand, right? Like, what does that mean? You're opening up doors. If your manager has a great experience with you and you are able to tell them about your background, your upbringing, they're going to probably hire another Afghan American. It's not going to feel so foreign to them, right? Granted, that person needs to have the skill sets and the the credentials for it, but they're gonna be more open-minded, right? To that relationship.
You're kind of like breaking down like stereotypes.
And
Stuff
exactly.
by introducing yourself.
Exactly. Yeah, I think how you carry yourself is really, really important.
I want to bring us back to the portion where we talked about, like the kind of challenges you had to face as a Afghan female. And you talked about how you're fortunate to have your parents. They're open-minded, but they're still Afghan. They're still traditional. Then there's other like people have like parents that are very traditional, very closed-minded.
Yeah.
So you were blessed in that sense, right?
Yeah.
What's your advice on how like young Afghan girls can navigate with parents that are a little bit more stricter when they want to go to school, they want an education, they want to like maybe go into business, go into work?
Yeah.
What are like little tips and tricks that you can provide for them?
I've dealt with mentoring girls, especially Afghan women. You shouldn't say girls because they're beautiful young women. I've dealt with mentoring them where they come from households where there's very traditional parents and they're against you moving. For a school opportunity, you got to be local. For a job opportunity that seems foreign because it's not a doctor, it's not a lawyer. What does that mean? What is the value to that? And you have to, what I tell them is you got to put yourself in their shoes. Especially if they're like immigrants, right? And maybe some of them are not. Maybe they've seen it all. They went to school here, but they're still traditional. That's a different case. But majority of their times, it's because they only can advise you as a parents. They're responsible for you and your safety and your well-being to a certain degree. Yeah. And they're only going to advise you and let you do what they know, right? And if they know the area, they know like the next 15-mile radius, right, of like the schools here, you're going to go there because it's convenient, it's close. Sometimes it's a financial thing and they don't understand that there is financial aid, there's scholarships, there are grants, and they don't know what that is and what that means, right? What it really comes to at the end of the day is the gap of knowledge, right? And understanding that financially this person is going to be okay and they'll be able to cover their costs for their school and their apartments and they won't go in debt. Afghans like, oh no, don't take a loan, like don't do credit card debts, like you like that's a no-no, right? But it's okay, like it's a matter of communicating with them and telling them like what this career is, like what does that mean, how much money do you make off of it, like, right? Parents want to know, like, is that going to be something that you can live off of if you're going to pursue this career? If you want to go to a certain university that's giving you a full ride scholarship, how much debt that's going to save you, right? Or if you are trying to move because this school opens up an opportunity for you because they have a specific program, trying to explain that and communicating that. I really do think that there's been moments where parents have been really hesitant and it's out of fear. It's just because they don't know what the other side looks like, or they just don't know what that loan is or what that grant is, or why this universities, all the universities are the same. Why do you need to go there? It's just a degree, right? It's honestly, it's a matter of like educating them and having that conversation. And it's difficult. And sometimes it's multiple times. And sometimes I have some bold mentees. They're like, well, I'm leaving, and that kind of creates tension, unfortunately, in that relationship. But then the parents comes around. Your mom and dad, at the end of the day, want to see you happy. They want to see you healthy and well. At least I hope. Right? There's different kinds of people out there, but I do think that how I've been successful, at least mentoring some of the young girls, is even myself. Sometimes I'm like, I'm happy to talk to them because I've done it, right? And then they see an Afghan girl who's successful, who's done it, like, okay, like, like, please come talk to my, like, I trust you, right? It helps. It's a trust, fear, lack of knowledge sort of scenario.
A lot of fear.
It is fear, and I don't blame them. Like, the world we live in, it's a cold world we live in, right? It's not safe. There's things that happen, especially when you're a young girl. You always worried, like, did she make it home safely? Did someone bother her? Is she eating? Is she hanging out with the right people? I think that's every parent concern, regardless if you're Afghan or not. But when you don't know the country, the society as well, you're going to be like, you're standing right next to me. You're not going far away.
You know what you just said earlier, do you feel like the long-term solution is like women like yourself breaking the barrier, and then the families, you know, over time now it's like, oh, look, I know this person, this girl's done it, this girl's done it, this girl's
She
done
turned out fine.
Yeah, it is. It's really that. It is really that. I remember when I love to travel. I know, like we were just talking about Italy, but when I started traveling, when I took the year off after med school, I started traveling, and girls would always tell me, and I always just I like photography, so I like to take photos of my travels. They'd be like, oh, like my parents would never let me. They would never let me to like even go to Los Angeles, and it's just the same state. Like, how does your mom and dad let you? And it was interesting because today, that was like years ago, like maybe 5-6 years, but today you see more and more young people traveling with their friends, and why? It's because it started to become a norm. Like, oh, my doctor Hola went, like they did it, right? Or like this girl, you know, as a family friend, they're doing it, and so I see that very similar to careers and college and education and other opportunities. They're like, oh, this person is doing really well working in tech. Like, what in the world is tech? Or this person did really well starting a business. Like, I'm going to work with them, or I want to learn from them, and I want to follow their footsteps. I think it makes it a bit more like reachable, right? It's like, oh, I can talk to this person, I can see them, I know them, they've done it, their parents were comfortable with it. Okay, maybe I should be a little bit more open-minded. So you make a really great point, right? I do think seeing more young Afghan women kind of breaking that glass in other areas of opportunities and jobs makes that more of a norm for us. And I think we're getting there. I really do. I see so many successful Afghans from finance to medicine to tech. I've seen people build successful companies, e-commerce. People have their own jewelry stores, like unique things. People are successful bakers, right? And catering companies. You know, if you told your mom, I'm going to grow up and become like a caterer, like, well, excuse me? Like, what? You know what I mean? But like at the end of the day, does it really matter? Like she's doing well, or he's doing well, and she's passionate, and she's happy, and she's successful, and she has a roof over her head. You know, like that's how you see a lot of like Americans. They're everywhere, right? And they're doing well in a lot of things, and that's because they've been allowed to explore. So I do encourage Afghans to do the non-traditional routes. Be the first one to break that glass, right? And just makes it much more believable that we can also do that. I also see really successful Afghan influencers, right? Like I get so proud to see a young Afghan girl or guy with thousands of followers. I'm like, cool, she is like she Some is doing something. Too, you know? It's great to see representation. You see them in their Afghan clothes. They talk about Ramadan. It's just making other communities to learn more about who we are and what we do. So I throw no shade on any sort of aspirations, passions someone has. Like I think it's all good for the community at the end of the day.
1000%. And that's honestly what we're missing is the support from other Afghans. I feel like if we focused on building as a community and less worrying about ourselves and our own insecurities and success and just being happy for someone else, even if they are doing better, then in a day, like, it's going to help you in the long run. Might not be helping you directly, but it could help your children, you know, might influence them, right? If I just feel like in general, if our community gets stronger, becomes more connected, kind of like how some other communities are, I feel like we will all reap the benefits in the long term.
And totally thrive off of it. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I do think, I really love Gen Z. I'm a millennial, but I even noticed the difference in how we approach things. But I do appreciate Gen Z because they kind of, there's like a togetherness. You know what I mean? I
hear that a lot.
There is this sense of,
I hear that a lot.
Oh, like, you know, you go girl, or like, yeah, bro, I'm proud of you. Like I sense that more in that generation, and that generation really holds people accountable, which I appreciate. And they also are not afraid to speak up and do and feel what's on their mind. You know, like they're authentic to who they are, and I appreciate that so much about them. It's really like it's like a fresh breath of air, honestly.
Yeah.
I still sometimes catch myself. I'm like, oh, what if I do this? What if this person gonna think? What about that? Da, da, da. And then, you know, I see my younger sibling. He's like, calls me bro.
Mm-hmm.
Bro, why would you even worry about that? Like, you know, like no one thinks about that. So it's funny. But I appreciate Gen Z for who they are.
Are we Gen Z?
I don't know. I've never been like too like aware of like where the cutoff is. Do you know the cutoff?
I say Gen Z. I don't want to say before they're like, no, that's wrong. But I have a group of cousins, and they're in a certain I would say like the 2000s almost. Like they're 20, 21, 22 years old now. I don't know like if that falls in Gen Z, but
Let's find out.
Yeah,
Let's
look it up, honestly.
Yeah, let's just find out.
But the reason why I can tell they're Gen Z, I can see on social media the way they present themselves, and they're very authentic. Their fashion, the things they like, what's trending, their language, their slang, all of it. Did you find out what it is?
We're Gen Z.
You guys are Gen Z, right?
Wait, what year? what year made the cutoff?
Late 1990s, early 2000s.
Yeah, I was gonna say early. Yeah.
Yeah.
We barely made it.
Yeah, I barely made the cutoff.
We're like the OGs.
That's why I'm always like right there. Like I'm like an old soul, but then I'm not.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's because I'm right there. I'm 98, so I'm right there.
Yeah. Well, I won't say my age on here, but
you talked about when you went to college and stuff, so.
But did I give years? I don't know.
You gave a year.
I did.
I was in my head. I was like, she's dating herself.
Yeah.
Kinda, if somebody's very curious, they'll figure it out.
Yeah, they will. They'll backtrack all my LinkedIn resume and figure out when I graduated. No, but honestly, I think every generation has its uniqueness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is just nice, even to when I was going to college. So I see the Afghans going to college today. I see such a huge pride and sense of where they come from and who they are. I also think what's happened, the fall of Afghanistan made a really, really big impact on the young generation. It was kind of like in the moment you're seeing on social media what's going on, and now you see these refugees in the city of Sacramento, I'm sure other parts of the country, and you're like, you feel a sense of connection with them in a weird way, you know? And I think that, personally myself, it has brought a lot of pride on who I am, where I come from, my story. I'm not afraid to go on a microphone in a non-Afghan community and proudly state where I come from and what we've been through. And I hope we continue kind of thrive like that as a community, honestly.
I think you guys' generations were like the breakers of barriers.
Yeah.
I think that's what when I think millennials, I think like, oh, the first cousin who did this, or the first, uncle who did this.
Yeah.
But I think now, like, you guys made so many things normalized that now, like, I think Gen Z is probably reaping a lot of those benefits.
Exactly.
It's totally spot on.
Yeah.
Totally spot on. See, I feel like we're the group that probably needs a therapy. The ones, like, the ones that have been through it, got judged for it,
Yes.
parents were saying no to us, having identity crisis.
Yeah.
It's really interesting, honestly, to kind of see the difference in that too, that experience.
Yeah.
But it's good, it's good to know that parents are also evolving. I know it's difficult for them too, as honestly, I have so much love and so much respect for our immigrant parents that have come here. They've been through so much. Imagine hitting the reset button, coming to a country you don't know the language. People were doctors, successful entrepreneurs, coming here, that degree, that business meant nothing. And then you have children, you have family you got to build with, right? Like it's difficult. And I also have so much empathy in love for that first group of children, right? That kind of have to go with that growing pains with their mom and dad. You see it all. You kind of go through it all. And I think you also become really extremely grateful for how far you come. Like every milestone has a really big meaning to you.
Yeah.
You know, like that milestone is more than just a small box you checked off.
Absolutely. You know, when I went to Italy and I saw how bad I struggled, it just hit me. I was like, you know,
Wow.
I can't believe, like, you know,
I'm
like
here.
what like America for my family, you know.
Yeah.
And not even just my family, all the Afghans, the ones that are still coming and the ones that I came here like 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah. And then there's moments like, I mean, not to go off on a tangent here, but there's moments I've also experienced guilt. Like I'll get to experience a beautiful life. Like, yeah, it was hard. Don't get me wrong. Being a first gen, difficult. But I'll be going to a beautiful country, experiencing a concert, and I'm like, dang, I'm like I wish my parents could be here.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Oh, yeah.
Like I wish they could have experienced this or be here and see this. And I always like have them in the back of my mind. And then I once saw this TikTok social media video of like sometimes we forget like our parents. It's like their first time experiencing life too. And so now I always really try to make it a point when it's like an event and it's like a concert or something. I'm like, Mom, you want to go? You know, or like, hey, I'll invite my khala. You want to like check this out?
Oh, yeah.
Or going traveling. I encourage them to do it, and I love it's a gift to me to see them kind of experience that, you know, and being young at heart, because I feel like they kind of lost that.
Yeah,
They got robbed of it.
Yeah, they got robbed out of a lot of really beautiful experiences. Yeah.
I always have that. Every
Yeah.
time I go somewhere, especially if I enjoy it, it makes it worse.
Yeah.
Because I'm like,
Yeah.
they would have loved
Yeah.
this so much. I can't just
Yeah.
fully just have it for myself, you know?
Yeah, I agree.
We are all in a very interesting position.
Yeah.
I you know, it's interesting when I'm like, I wonder what my kids are going to experience, because at that point they're second generation, right?
Yeah.
So it's like when they're going to high school and they're trying to lie to me about it, it's like, all right, like, you know, maybe I could have gone away with it, but I know that that's not what that is or how that works, right?
Mhm.
So I always kind of think about, oh, I wonder what it's like being a first gen parent, right? Because you've actually experienced the life here. You know the ins and outs a little bit better than your parents.
Right.
And what traditions do you pass to
Yeah.
your child? Do you pass the language, the heritage, the cultural aspect of it? I also sometimes worry that those really special parts of being Afghan are kind of dying as we go
Yeah.
from generation to generation, right? I think it's such a beautiful thing that we have Afghans that can speak our language. And I really try not to hate on, you know, I don't say the word hate is strong, but, you know, tease folks who have broken Farsi a little bit or broken Pashto. I can't even speak Pashto, but I try not to tease the younger ones, because I'm like, you know what, at least they're trying,
Yeah.
you know, and I don't want to discourage them.
Yeah.
But I think even language is such an important thing for us to preserve. And, you know, Nowruz is such a big thing for us. And, you know, the traditions of weddings and festivities, all of that. We find it annoying when we're growing up, like, oh, we got to do that again. But now that I'm at this age, I'm like, wow, that is so special that I get to do this, and it's specifically for me.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up Nowruz. I'm like, when I'm older, like, I wonder if my kids will ever try Afmewat. Like, I can't.
Yeah.
I don't know how to make that.
Yeah.
You know, or like Samanak. Like,
right.
I actually like Samanak. I know a lot of people don't
and
like
the
it.
ceremony of like making
Yeah.
Samanak.
Yeah,
It's a whole
thing.
gathering.
Yeah, it's a whole fun thing. Even in our generation now, it's kind of people aren't doing it as often and stuff. It's like, yeah, it's always interesting. You know, I personally, I'm gonna try my best, but like, it's impossible to do it the way our parents did it.
100%.
Like, we're just not on their level.
I also think, but you know, and we might not be able to give them that, but I think to our kids, I think there's gonna be a lot of understanding and maybe less tension of the why do you got to go to college so far, right? Because we now understand the American culture a little bit better, and how do you advance and how do you become successful, or right, like how do you figure out your path. And so I think in that aspect, maybe the next generation won't have as much as problems.
Yeah,
but I could see, maybe some components of our Afghan identity might get
they're
lost.
gonna have it easy.
Yeah.
They'll have it easier.
Those punks.
Yeah.
And then we're gonna be like those old people, like back in my generation.
Yeah, seriously. Back in my day, we had a pandemic going on, but yeah, it was. It's been honestly like a fun journey of just experiencing things in my life and the different transitions of careers and being a millennial and a first gen.
I always like to close off the podcast with kind of like a blanket statement, anything, advice, anything you want to speak to our audience, right? Based off all of your experiences, right? As a millennial, as somebody who's done these major changes, as an Afghan female, anything you feel in your heart that you just want to convey to your Afghans, whatever it is, this is your time to just express it.
There is a moment when I was leaving. I was on the verge of saying no to my career in medicine, and I was in Hawaii, and I was at a hibachi, right? Like you sit there at a table and they cook the food in front of you. And it was me and my friend, and there was other folks that were sitting at my table, and there was this really sweet old man sitting next to me. His words changed my views on life, and it honestly changed my life. And he was this old sweet man, and I was talking to all these people, and I noticed he was interested in the conversation, but he was like too shy to say anything. So I'm like, oh, like what brings you here? And he goes, oh, like my wife passed away and I'm traveling the world now. And he goes, I used to travel a lot for work, but I never really got to enjoy it. So now I'm trying to travel and explore. And I said, oh, are you retired? He's like, yeah. He's like, I sold my company to this company in Japan. And I was like, oh, what was your company? He's like, oh, I had like a software company. I live in Texas. And we chatted, and he goes, I have a plane and I fly it around. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, this man is different. Like
he's rich.
Yeah, he rich. But he was so humble and so sweet. He was in a Hawaiian t-shirt. You'd never think that was his life, right? And as I was leaving, we had this great connection. He was talking to me and my friend, and he was like a grandfather, just giving us like wisdom and just being so kind. And I said, oh, that's so funny, you're a pilot. I said, I always wanted to be a pilot. And I was like, and he goes, why aren't you doing it? And I was like, oh, well, like I'm trying to do this career, and I'm giving him a whole rundown of why I can't be a pilot. And he goes, you want me to give you a secret to life? And I said, okay. I was like, what's the secret to life, And he goes, the man with the best story wins. And I was like, what does that mean? And he goes, when you watch movies and when you read books, what are the ones that are the most captivating? It's the one where there's love, there's loss, there is winning, there's losing, there is trying new things not working out, right? It's the story that makes you to want to read more. Mm-hmm. So he goes, when you write your story, do you want someone to read that you woke up every day and you did this one thing because that's what society told you to do? Or do you want them to know that there was heartbreak, but there is redemption, there was love, there was loss, there was wins? He's like, what do you want them to read? So he goes, and the only way you're going to write the best story is if you try things that you are afraid of trying. And whether it's a language, whether it's a new food, whether it's a new journey, a career, whatever it is, he goes, you got to try it. And so I walked away, and I'm like, is that a sign from the universe? Because I'm about to leave like my career in medicine, right? And why would this man randomly say that to me? But I always think of him till this day, and his name is David. And I don't know where he is today, but I always think of him, of when I'm about to do something, or it's like a food item or a language I want to learn or a place I want to see or a friend I want to make. I don't have fear. I just go for it, and I'm like, it's going to be part of my story, it's going to be something great's going to come out of this, either a lesson learned or a win, right? Like there's no losses in my story. So my last saying to everyone is, be the man with the best story, right? Don't be afraid to try things. If things don't work out, it's okay. It's like something better is going to come, whether that's a friendship, a relationship, a work opportunity, family disagreements. It's okay, right? Like keep going, keep flipping the pages, keep writing, and see how it all ends up.
Wow. I got goosebumps.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, just this conversation had inspired me so much about not having fear and being like open to change. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, mid conversation I was ready to like change jobs or
Yeah,
something
like, I'm
crazy.
leaving.
I'm not even kidding,
I
seriously.
swear I
Yeah.
felt the same way.
And then this story was like the
Yeah.
cherry on top. Like, it followed the same narrative.
Yeah.
Just live your life to the fullest.
You have to. You have to. Some people tell me, they're like, Hawa has no fear. She just kind of goes for it. Like, whether she knows it or doesn't,
Yeah.
she's just like, yeah, I could do it.
Yeah.
And I was never like that. Honestly, I was really never like that. But I'm like, what's the worst that's going to happen?
Yeah.
Okay, it's not going to work out. I've been in worse situations. I made it here. Once you've kind of, paved the way, it's a lot easier to pave it again than it is to pave it for the first time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you lose everything, there's always a way.
Yeah.
You're gonna get it all back, right? I just think that you have to just try things and see what sticks, right? And don't be afraid. I think people talk themselves out of things more than they talk themselves into things.
Yeah.
Very
And that's what I try not to do. I'm human. I still do it sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny. There's times I will like reach out to the vice president of some company and I'm like, hey, I'm Hawa. And someone's like, you just reached out and emailed them? Okay, like who cares? What's the worst thing gonna happen? They're not gonna respond to me. They're gonna say no, or maybe they might respond and they might just give me what I'm looking for, right? So you just gotta
Take all your shots.
Yeah, take all your shots, write your story, keep it moving. It's not the end of the world. Enjoy your loved ones. And you got one shot in this life. You might as well make it the best one you got.
For sure. Thank you so much. I
Of
mean, you
course.
inspired
Yes.
me. I know for a fact there's people out there that are gonna watch this and it's actually gonna impact them.
I
and,
hope
and
so.
Yes.
you know
I
that's
hope
the goal
so.
for this, and I think you're definitely the right person for that.
Yes.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. You shared a lot of great wisdom. Motivated me. I can tell you motivated Mansoor too.
Oh, watch! I get a call tomorrow. You guys are jobless. You guys decided to quit. You're going somewhere else.
Like, hey, Hawa, do you know anybody looking for some help?
You know what you just said. I was like, you probably get a lot of great deals just from talking and reaching
Yeah.
out to people, and you're traveling, whether you're at hotels or
Yeah.
traveling.
Start conversations. You never know who you'll meet.
Yeah.
I kid you not. I once got a job. I got my job in venture capital, and there's like an ongoing joke in my business school. I got my job in venture capital in the women's bathroom. I kid you not. Like, I remember I was talking to someone, and she was having a rough day, and someone comes out of the stall, and she goes, who is just talking right now? And I was like, oh, we were. She gives her card to the other girl, was like, hey, if you're looking for jobs in HR, like, I have companies that could take you. She goes, you mind walking with me? I got to catch my flight. We walked together. She goes, have you ever considered a career in VC? I'm like, yeah, 100%. Like, and mind you, like 2 weeks ago, my friend just told me about VC. I was like, yeah, I want a career in VC. She goes, you're really good in sales. Like, have you ever considered a career in VC? I was like, yeah. She's like, here's my card. She goes, you send me an email, send me my resume. And I kid you not, it was exactly the firm that I was trying to get into.
Wow.
And
That's
she wasn't even
amazing.
supposed to be there, She was just there to judge a competition.
Wow.
She wasn't even there to recruit anybody. And I was like, are you a recruiter? This is how naive I was. I didn't even know anything about it. I was like, are you a recruiter? And she goes, no, I'm a partner.
Oh.
And I applied, and I went through the interview processes and everything, and I ended up interning, and I worked for them for a little bit. Yeah.
Wow.
So you got to talk to people.
Qismat and nasib.
Yeah, it really is that. You just gotta, doors will open up. You just gotta believe in it. But anyways, I don't want to run this over longer than it needs to be. So
We're all set.
as Afghans, we're going to say bye for the third time here. But it was honestly a pleasure.
They're not gonna see it, but yeah, we're probably gonna say goodbyes
Yeah.
multiple times.
It was honestly a pleasure being on
Thank
here
you.
with you
Thank
guys.
you. We really
Thank
appreciate you. We
Yeah.
appreciate your time. We know
Of
that you
course.
have a lot going on.
No, thank you
Yes.
for having me. Honestly, I enjoyed talking with you guys. Ahmad knows you guys too, and he always speaks so highly of Mr. I know we've had a couple of conversations
yeah.
about career stuff, but I am so proud of what you guys are doing. I think it's really important to have these types of platforms and have folks connect and realize there's other people in the world that are doing something similar to them and they're reachable. So you're giving back to the community in ways you probably don't see the fruits now of it, but I'm sure you are down the road.
Inshallah.
Inshallah, yeah, that's the goal.
Thank you again.
Thanks once again.
Of course.
Yeah,
Thank
appreciate
you.
Thank you everyone for joining us at the Majlis podcast. We would love your support, so please like, comment, share, and subscribe.